Baseball is back, and the first pitch is on Netflix. The New York Yankees, led by 7-time All-Star Aaron Judge, head to the San Francisco Bay to take on Rafael Devers' San Francisco Giants. This season kicks off with one exclusive opening night game. Watch MLB Opening Night, the New York Yankees versus the San Francisco Giants, live on Netflix. Wednesday, March 25th at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. Stop waiting around for the perfect candidate. Instead, use Indeed sponsored jobs to find the right people with the right skills fast. It's a simple way to make sure your listing is the first candidates see. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs have 4 times more applicants than non-sponsored jobs. So go build your dream team today with Indeed. Get a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
You know you need fiber for a healthy gut, but do you actually know how to get it? Quaker's been serving up fiber since 1877, with over 100 great-tasting, good source of fiber options to choose from. Whether you like old-fashioned oats, instant oatmeal, granola, or oatmeal squares, Quaker makes it delicious. So good. Get your fiber with Quaker. Shop Quaker's good source of fiber products at a store near you.
Welcome to Howe the podcast. It's Gav, and you join us very early this fine Monday morning as we have gathered to chat all about Sunderland's win at St James's Park against Newcastle United in what was a thrilling, weird, strange, amazing, exhilarating, all those words. It was all of those things, but Sunderland did get the job done right at the death with a fantastic goal from Brian Brobby. And today, like I say, I'm joined by a couple of my Maras. First up, we've got Martin. Hello, mate.
Hello, Gav. Yes, not a bad morning, is it? It's
no.
one of the best. I think you'll find.
Yes, you've been up quite a bit, mate. I mean, obviously, everyone knows listening that you're on the other side of the world, but it was a weird kick-off time for you, wasn't it?
Well, it was quite a good kick-off time in some respects. It was 11 o'clock at night, so it wasn't one of those where you kind of got to go to bed first of all. You can afford to stay up a little bit. But of course, you know, if you do the maths with that, match finished about 1, then you stay up and watch the replays and the interviews and all that sort of stuff. Then try getting to sleep after that. So I think I probably got about an hour's sleep. I've been running very much on coffee and fumes all day, but no, it's all good. And my little lad, Ted, he's 12-year-old. He begged me to wake him up for the match. And it's obviously a school day on Monday morning, but I got him up at 11 o'clock, about 11:15. He'd laying out his kit and his scarf and everything at the end of the bed. So he jumped up, watched the match with us. He woke the neighbourhood up. I can tell you that much. When Brian Brobby scored at the end, he was banging on doors and waving his shirt around like a lunatic. But no, absolutely fantastic, and it's what it's all about, isn't it?
That's it. I was also waving my shirt over my head like a lunatic when I was in the pub. Also joining us today, we've got a very special guest, somebody who's never been on the pod, so making his debut today. We've got Damian Spellman, who is the Press Association's North East sports reporter. Morning, mate.
Morning, guys.
How are you? How are you feeling after that?
Good, yeah. Do you know what? It's one of those, I'm always glad when the derbies are over because I don't like the build-up, I don't like the games, I don't like the fallout most of the time. It's so it's nice to get it out of the way. But no, it was a good one to talk about yesterday. It was an enjoyable game and obviously very contrasting emotions either side of the divide.
Yeah, you must have covered quite a few of these games from the press box, I presume. Like, where does that rank in terms of the occasion, the atmosphere, the feeling around the game? Is it right up there?
Yeah, it was up there. I think my first one was 99, the one in the rain at St James's. I think that was the first one I can remember.
Good first game, to be fair.
It was, and similar in some respects.
Yes.
Same result, obviously. But yeah, no, I thought the atmosphere was very good, and I thought the game was intriguing, really, because it was a classic game of two halves, wasn't it? I think I feared for Sunderland at 1-0, but by the time we got in the last few minutes, if either team was going to win it, it was Sunderland.
Yeah, I think that was the way I felt, Martin, as well. Just by the end of the game, Sunderland were probably the better team. We looked like the one with momentum, and we speculated on it during the week about Newcastle playing such an exhausting game away at Barcelona on Wednesday, where we'd had a full week to run up to it. And I know we were missing a lot of players, but we looked like the sharper, fitter team. And to me, I had this gut feeling towards the end of the game we were going to get a goal. And I mean, what do we do it? It was amazing.
Oh, fantastic! And look, whether it was sharpness or fitness or what, but I thought all of the second half we were the better side.
Yeah,
And I think there was a stat flashed up after maybe 20 or 30 minutes of the second half, and we'd had 5 shots. They'd had no attempts on goal. We'd had a lot of possession. So I actually think, as Damian said, very much a game in 2 halves. But that second half, I thought we were absolutely dominant. And I don't think you can put that down to fatigue from midweek or anything like that for them. Because maybe in the later stages, yes, that comes into play. But I thought we were tremendous in the second half. And as I say, as the game went on, once we got that equaliser, and obviously we had the disallowed goal and all that sort of stuff for them, didn't we? But as the last 15 minutes sort of came into view, you could just see us getting more and more control. They were desperate to try to force that goal, weren't they? They were leaving spaces in midfield that we were just exploiting. And we've seen all season how good we can be on the counter attack, and how good we are when we've got people like Xhaka on the ball and Siddiqui, and when Lafayette came on, he gets on the ball. You've got the quality to make things happen, and no, it's just brilliant, man.
What do you think it is, Damian, about Newcastle and this fixture? Because it's now been 15, 16 years since they last won a league derby.
Yeah.
And Sunderland just have this hold over Newcastle. Like, can you put your finger on what that is? Having seen so many different generations of teams, both at Sunderland and Newcastle, as you've been, covering these derbies. Like, what is it about Newcastle that, regardless of who the manager is, the players are, they can't get the job done against Sunderland? Like, can you put your finger on what that is?
It's a really good question, because, as you say, it's different teams, different managers. It can't be psychological, because it's not the same people all the time. It's really difficult. And I just don't know whether different iterations of the team haven't sort of got the fixture. Whether you can't say it's because it's a cosmopolitan squad, because this Newcastle squad is probably the least cosmopolitan it's been. There are more homegrown players in it than there's been in years and years and years. And Sunderland is a very cosmopolitan squad, so that it doesn't compute. I don't know. It's very difficult to explain. I mean, I would imagine it's pretty unusual. I'm trying to think across the other derbies. It's pretty unusual for a team to have such dominance over such a lengthy period. But yeah, it's 2010 at St James's, 2011 at the Stadium of Light, isn't there? Ryan Taylor goal were the last wins. And yeah, you just, I don't know. I just can't explain it. I'm not sure anybody can.
What's your thoughts on it, Martin? Why do you think Newcastle Sunderland have this hold over them, and it's just, it is pretty difficult to explain, but there's got to be a reason why. It's not through pure luck and fortune that Sunderland just keep picking up results in the derbies, but we do. We keep doing it. We keep getting the job done. And I've been trying. I was walking this morning with the dogs, listening to the lads do the reaction pod, and it came into my head. I was like, I want to talk about this today on the pod, because I don't know what it is. Is it just the way they get themselves built up for games? Maybe, I don't know what it is. Me.
Who knows? I'm sort of chuckling to myself that, the youngest Newcastle fans who've seen their team beat us, they'll have to be about 24, really, won't they, to remember it. So, there's a whole, 2 generations of supporters, really, who've never seen them beat Sunderland in the league. It is a really weird one, isn't it? And, you talk about new players coming in, maybe not getting it, but you look at our squad, the turnaround in players, the turnover in players, they were all up for both games and completely got it. They've had different managers come in. There's probably this, I think that one of the differences is this arrogance, that I would call it arrogance anyway. And we had it back in, 95 or 96, when they were going for the title. And they were, oh, you're not our rivals anymore. Manchester United are our rivals now. We're not bothered about you. Now, I think but there is this thing within Newcastle fans that they actually don't want to be bothered by Sunderland. They almost think they're too good. They should have other rivalries. And I think there's part of that potentially comes into it off the field. Whether that actually comes into focus on the field for the playing staff and managers and stuff like that, I haven't got a clue. But that's the only thing I could think of where there's a difference, I think, in terms of how the supporters want to feel about that game. We love it and hate it at the same time. But, we love the rivalry. We love beating them. They love beating us, but they don't like to admit it. You saw all week, didn't you? Our big game is Barcelona.
Well, yeah,
Come on. Who are you kidding yourselves?
There was I think it was Sky Sports did, it was like, it might have been for the news or social media, but it was, they were going round in Barcelona asking Newcastle fans which game they would rather win. And I seen a tweet, someone said, unfortunately, there was a third option which nobody was asking about, which was much more drastic. But like, Damien, I don't know if you saw it, but there's a quote doing the rounds from Anthony Gordon after the game. Well, I think it was an interview he did with the club's media team, so obviously it's internal. But there is a clip doing the rounds where he said that the frustrating thing is, in my opinion, they're not a very good team compared to us. We shouldn't lose to them. And that was what was in my head when I was thinking about, like, because that's quite an arrogant thing to say after you've lost twice to Sunderland in a season, isn't it?
That's hard. I think from a purely objective point of view, I would say they might have, they could argue that individually they might have some better players, but I think to say they're a better team is clearly not true on the evidence of those two games. And in all honesty, what's happened this season, on the day, I would say, yes, they're a better team, but the proof of the pudding is, well, you look at the points in the table. Sunderland are above them in the table. Sunderland have beaten them twice this season. So I think that's very difficult to argue. I can sort of see his point to an extent in terms of listing individuals, but I think he's on thin ice there.
The team that Sunderland put out, Martin, was, to be fair, I think most of us kind of predicted that would be the side, or be somewhere in the region of like that, given we knew a lot of players were going to struggle to make it for this one. And I was saying this to people, kind of the day or two before the match, because everyone's worrying about, oh, well, is Enzo Lefebvre going to be fit? Is Nordy McNeely going to be fit? Is, Dan Ballard going to be fit? And et cetera, and et cetera. And I was saying, it's almost not about who plays, it's about the game plan and how you enact it. And when I came to that thinking, I was like, actually, I don't really mind who plays, because when you think about it, Bris will have had a team in mind, regardless of who might be available late. And that's clearly why we got the team we did, because a lot of these players were on the bench. But he'd had to prepare all week with a group who he knew would definitely be available to play. So he couldn't have like, well, we might do this if Enzo's fit, we might do this if Nordy's fit. It was like, no, this is our game plan, this is how we're going to go there. And I think that was superb preparation from us, because it would have been very, very easy for Reggie Slibris to actually put, I don't know how fit they were, but put Nordy in, put Enzo in, put Ronaldo in, put Dennis Serkin in. Do you know what I mean? It would have been very, very easy for him to do that, but at last minute, and that could have really scuppered the game plan. I'm quite glad. Obviously, it's easy saying this in hindsight because we won, of course, but I'm quite glad that he picked the team he did, because he had all week to have a good run at it, didn't he? And yeah, obviously the result we got in the end shows that it was the right decision to go the way we did.
Yeah, I'm not sure I completely agree with you on that, because I think the other side to that is that we've spoken all season about how well drilled players are within that formation that we like to play, how well they know what's expected of them in the roles, and people can just come in and out and they know what is expected of them in that position, and other players know what's going on as well. So I think if you look at the positions that were obviously in question, apart from Ballard, they were primarily out wide, weren't they? So you had that core in the centre with Alderete, and I think everyone knew Roofs was going to be out. I think that was a fairly obvious one, unfortunately. But you had Alderete was going to play at the back. You had the three in midfield with Xhaka, Diarra and Siddiqui were going to play, and Robbie was going to play up front. So you had that spine of the team, and everything else was kind of working around it. So there was different things that could happen. And obviously, as the week progressed, fitness would have come into play and all that sort of stuff. But I had the suspicion all week that because of the gap until the next fixture, he would give players the opportunity to get fully match fit. And I think, as it turned out, it was completely right. I had the feeling that once he got to the last 15, 20 minutes, if you got people like Lafayette on the bench, other people to come on and change the game at that point, brilliant. The job of the team that started was to get to that point after an hour where we're well into the game. And, it could have gone horribly different in the first half, couldn't it? But we did get to that point after an hour. And he was then, obviously, he was a little bit later on when Lafayette came on. But that was a match-winning sub, wasn't it, really? He brought Lafayette on, he set up the winning goal. So it was, yeah, look, it wasn't surprising. I think, the other bit too is, Chris Rigg played brilliantly last week against Brighton. So he's come into the team. And, the Bris has said, hasn't he, players get a chance. If they take that chance, they'll get more chances. And I think for Rigg to not play in that game yesterday against Newcastle would have been devastating for him.
Yeah.
So for him to, the manager to show faith with him, and by the way, I thought he was superb again, Chris Rigg, both defensively and defensively. I thought he was superb. That'll do him the world of good. But I thought it would be really difficult for him to not play Rigg. So if you've got the three that we've already talked about midfield, you've got Rigg there. Trey Hume's always going to play one side or the other. So you're then you've only actually got 2 or 3 positions up for grabs, haven't you? So look, we can sit here now, Monday morning. Oh, you got it absolutely spot on, can't we?
What did you make of the Newcastle lineup, Damian? Because obviously that was pretty contentious too from their perspective. He decided to drop Malik Chow, who regularly starts, and plays for him Kane Botman, who went off injured. But I think that was a big call to bring him into the team. And obviously Newcastle had lost Tonali in the week as well, and that was a late call, wasn't it, for him to play or not play? And I think Jacob Ramsey and Voltemada came into those positions in the middle. So when you saw the teams, before the game, what did you make particularly of the Newcastle lineup?
Yeah, I wasn't surprised he dropped Chow because poor lad had an absolute nightmare in Barcelona. He was at fault on at least 2 of the goals, and but he's played 40-odd games this season. He's the one player in the defence who's played virtually every game, and at times it looks like he's running on empty. I must admit. So I wasn't too surprised that he made that decision, although it took away a bit of their mobility. But because Sunderland ostensibly just play with Brobby up front, I didn't think that might be too much of an issue with them. The one I was surprised at was Voltemada, I must admit, because he's played him in this midfield role, which is contentious, and he is very good on the ball. But I just thought if Sunderland I expected Sunderland to sit deep in the first half, which they did. And when a team does that, I think you need pace and you need to move the ball quickly. And he doesn't do that. So that was the one I was surprised at, I must admit. I wasn't too surprised with Ramsey. I think Tonali was the big miss. Well, actually, the bigger miss was Bruno Guimaraes, who was never going to play. He's the one player who can unlock a packed defence, and they were always going to miss him. But yeah, in his absence, Tonali, I think was the big disappointment for them. I think they would have wanted him fit for a game like that.
I was pretty pleased, Martin, with you kind of look around the pitch and you see their team, and I was looking at the Sunderland team and thinking, well, I fancy Brobby against their centre halves because he's so strong. I thought, well, that's I was actually quite glad to see Chow not starting because he's very mobile. I know, as Damian says, he's played a lot of football, but I was glad it wasn't him because I thought he would have a better chance of handling Brobby than the other two. I thought the midfield, Siddiqui, Diarra, Xhaka, flanked by Rigg, Talby, and then obviously, the likes of Hume and even Alderete and Geertruida were all stepping into midfield. I just felt those were the key battles that I thought, even when I saw the teams before the game, I thought, if we can win them battles, then we've got a good chance in the game. The only place I was really worried was with their pace up top, but given we kind of expected Sunderland to sit in, it was going to be difficult for Newcastle to expose any space in behind. And I was just really happy when I saw the two teams, if I'm honest. I was pretty chuffed with that, even without seeing the game kick off.
Yeah, I think the players that Newcastle had missing were obviously beneficial for us, weren't they? And that was a big thing with Tonali certainly not playing. But I think we've got to come back to this point with how much these players cost that Newcastle had in their team. It's not as if they had a load of kids in the team. You got Alanga who cost, 55 million or something. Ramsey cost 40 million in the summer. Baltimore, 65 million. Yeah. Eddie Howe's bloody crying about not being able to spend money, and that's why he wasn't able to beat us.
Yeah, he brought that up after the game, didn't he?
He did bring it up after the game. And Alanga, I worked out, Alanga and Baltimore cost more than our whole team that we had out yesterday. And they're two signs that he's made. So, yeah, you can scrap that conversation completely because it's absolute load of bollocks. But, look, both sides were missing good players. We had, 6? If you're going to pick our strongest 11, we had 6 players out of that strongest 11, I would argue. You might argue 5, but certainly 5 or 6. They had some players missing. And, I think squad depth has been a topic of conversation for us this season, hasn't it? In terms of, have we got the depth of squad for players to come in and be able to do a good job? Well, a number of those players came in yesterday and proved that they could do a very good job. I do think Xhaka's so important for us. So, and I think you saw that again yesterday. You saw him lifting everybody up after the goal that we conceded. We saw him bossing people around, slowing play down, speeding play up. And I don't think you can overemphasize how important he is to how we play out under, whichever one it is. Again, I'm running on copious amounts of coffee and fumes at the moment. But I think Xhaka was his first real game back where I felt he's been relatively fully fit.
Yeah.
And what a game for him to be fully fit for, because I just saw he very quietly ran the show.
Yeah. I don't know if you were in the in that press conference, Damian, or not after the game, but what did you make of Eddie Howe's sort of the way he reacted to the defeat? Because I did find that quite interesting, the fact that he excused it away by talking about things like, transfer budgets and not being able to. It was I found it very odd when I was listening. If I'm perfectly honest, he wasn't going to come out and throw his players under the bus, but as Martin says, it is a point worth making that even with a lot of players out, Newcastle have got a very expensively assembled team out on the pitch there, and we're talking about reasons why they might not be able to turn up against Sunderland, but for me, that's a strong side that they put out even without Tonali and Guimaraes.
Yeah, I think I'll make a couple of. I wasn't actually in the press conference. I was in the mix, so my colleague was in the press conference, and I could be wrong, but I thought that answer was in response to a question about how do you take the team on to the next level.
Yeah.
But I could be wrong. I don't know whether it was specifically in relationship to yesterday's game. The other thing I would say was, yes, Newcastle have paid a lot of money for those players, but I think they paid significantly over the odds as well because of the there is a sort of, not Newcastle tax, but when people know you've got money, the prices go up. But that aside, absolutely, all those players, cost a huge amount of money. And as Martin rightly says, Sunderland assembled a squad or brought in 14 players on a fraction of the money Newcastle spent last summer. So yeah, I don't think that's a particularly persuasive argument to make. But I don't think there's any doubt that Newcastle team underperformed, particularly in the second half, and actually has underperformed for much of the season, particularly in the Premier League.
Why do you think that is? Do you think it's just the struggling to cope with the frequency of games, maybe? Because as me and you were chatting off air there, I was talking about how, you watched, you could argue with the first goal, and it was a terrible mistake from O'Neill.
Yeah.
But what you saw in that moment was probably the best of Newcastle from the way they press, because it wasn't as though it was, put on a play for him to just pass it into the net. Gordon still had a little bit to do, and you've got to give credit to Newcastle in that moment. They actually pressed us really well, and they took the chance. And I think that's probably when I watch Newcastle and they play well, they tend to do that bit very well.
Yeah.
But when you're playing 3 games a week, you cannot sustain that type of showing. You can't. You just cannot press the way that they want to. And as we'll probably get onto as we talk more, but as the game more on, it goes in teams' favour. I think. Correct if I'm wrong. You said that there was a stat about Newcastle dropping points late in games as well. I think it's obviously a problem for them.
Yeah. I mean, in terms of the workload, that was their 51st game of the season yesterday. And the stat you're talking about, they've now dropped 22 points from winning positions, which is like half again the points that they've actually managed to compile at the moment. So yeah, I think I still think Newcastle have never really recovered from the Isak situation last summer because the whole shape hung off them, and he triggered the press at his best. When he went, Gordon went, Murphy went, and then the midfielders came in behind, and they used to strangle teams with that press. But you can do that so many times in a season, I think, and they haven't got they've lost Isak, who was the quickest player on the team, and the best finisher as well. But also they've lost the coordination of that press. It's no good if 2 press and 1 doesn't, or 4 press and 1 doesn't. It's got to be coordinated. And at their best, the season they finished 4th, I think it was. That was perfectly coordinated, and it hasn't been. And I do think the amount of games with a squad that's not as deep as it needs to be has an impact in that respect. So yeah, I would, that would be my suggestion as to why it's not quite worked.
I was saying to Damian when we were just off air there, Martin, before you joined us, about half time, and I was just sat there with my head in my hands, so frustrated that we just handed that lead to Newcastle on a plate. And do you know what it is as well? I was really gutted. It was Luke O'Nien who'd made the mistake, because everybody knows I'm such an advocate for him. He's my favourite player. So when he comes into the team, I really want to see Luke do well, and he made the mistake, which gave them a lead. But I know, and to be fair to him, I thought he was brilliant other than that. So it was like, one of them. But it was frustrating, wasn't it? I don't know if you were the same as me, sat there, but I was just gutted. I was sat there going, I cannot believe that we've done that again. I kind of felt like after the FA Cup game, was it Ekwa did something very similar?
I did, didn't he? Yeah.
Yeah, and I was absolutely fuming at half time that we'd done that. And I mean, we'll come on to how it kind of went from there, but it is really frustrating when you just shoot yourself in the foot like that, isn't it?
Oh, it is. And look, by half time, I was actually really glad that we were just 1-0 down, because I knew once the Bris got them into the dressing room, we'd come out, you have confidence that you'll sort a couple of things out, and you'll emerge for the second half a bit better, which obviously we did. But I was so annoyed with that goal. I thought it was actually ridiculous on so many levels. I thought it was disgraceful, to be honest. And I think we can look at it now and go, oh, it's all right because we won. But that goal, if they'd been a bit sharper, that could have started an avalanche.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought we were so naive. And this isn't just about Luke O'Nien. It's about Alderete, Elborg, Xhaka. Like, they didn't know what they were doing. And they kind of almost got in a situation where they felt they had to hurry because the crowd were on the back to get the game restarted. And, we talked on the podcast last week, didn't we, about short goal kicks and the reasons why and all that sort of stuff.
I did think about that conversation when it happened.
But like the whole thing that we talked about there was obviously it creates a different angle for people to pass the ball into and all that sort of stuff. But usually it's a defender giving the ball to the goalkeeper to change angle rather than the goalkeeper giving the ball to the defender. Now, I think it's a terrible pass by the keeper because he gives it to O'Nien's wrong foot. He's almost sort of stumbling around on it. It's not a decent ball. But they were so aggressive with the press. It was dumb to not do anything else apart from pump it along.
Yeah.
Like, that should have just been fired down the field. So regardless of how they were set up, so early on into a derby game like that, where all you want to do is quieten the crowd down, go and give them a sniff. I just thought it was dumb and so naive, and I thought it was ridiculous. I thought it was just absolutely disgraceful, to be perfectly honest, how we tried that so early on, because it just wasn't on. It just wasn't on. Elborg had already had that thing where he was a little bit slow on the ball, and Gordon charged it down. He got lucky there, didn't he? So we had this very early thing where they were starting to get a bit of momentum. We were looking a bit shaky at the back, and we just created a situation that we did not need to create. And I thought it was, absolutely awful. What I will say, though, Luke O'Nien's performance after that, from a mental perspective, is one of the best things I've seen on the football field by a football player. You know what? It reminded me of, remember when Roy Keane got booked against Juventus in the Champions League semi? And he produced one of the best midfield performances I've seen to drag his team through, even though he knew he was going to be banned for the final. it was kind of reminiscent of that because 09 had done something, I actually think he just slipped. It wasn't a really awful pass, but he slipped, he lost his foot, and the whole situation was awful. But the way that he got himself right and put in the performance he did after that, I think is all credit to him. And it's so important to point out because I thought he was great after that. He threw himself into the way of things. He didn't let it affect him, or didn't let it visibly affect him anyway. And so many other players in that situation would have gone completely into the shell, wouldn't? Especially somebody who's starting the second Premier League game or third Premier League game. He's barely played, has he?
That's right.
To come into a game of that magnitude and do that so early on, it takes tremendous mental, attitude, whatever you want to call it, to actually turn in performances after that. And he would be the most relieved person at full time, wouldn't he? But God, that was such an awful goal. It was absolutely the last thing that you'd want to do in a derby away at St James's Park, was to gift them that goal after 10 minutes. But it kind of makes it all the better, doesn't it? That we did give them that early gift and they still weren't able to beat us.
LifeLock, how can I help?
The IRS said I filed my return,
but I haven't.
1 in 4 tax-paying Americans has paid the price of identity fraud.
What do I do?
My refund, though.
I'm freaking out.
Don't worry, I can fix this.
LifeLock fixes identity theft guaranteed and gets your money back with up to $3 million in coverage.
I'm so relieved.
No problem. I'll be with you every step of the way.
1 in 4 was a fraud-paying American. Not anymore. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit LifeLock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
I think that's a really good point, Damian, what Martin makes about the way that Sunderland carried on and didn't allow it to become an avalanche, because we've seen this in the past. I mean, the one that sticks out to me is the 5-1 game where Newcastle got the goal fairly early and it just kind of escalated from that point and they ended up rolling Sunderland over. And it could have been a situation like that had the mental strength of the collective team, not just Luke O'Nien, had it not been, what it is. It's something that's been pointed to often with Luke O'Nien about his mental strength and his mentality when it just comes to life, never mind football. But yeah, I think it could have went completely differently, couldn't it, had Sunderland not stayed switched on?
Absolutely, but it's not the first time they've done it. As you said, this season they've been very resilient. I was at the Bournemouth game when they were 2-0 down after 20 minutes or whatever, hadn't had a kick and looked dreadful, and came back to win it 3-2. It seems to be in the DNA of the team, and I think that comes from people like Luke O'Nien and Granit Xhaka and people like that. But yeah, absolutely. I must admit, I sort of from the other side of what Martin was saying earlier. At half time, I was thinking, I'm not sure 1-0's enough for Newcastle, because they hadn't made the most of. In fairness, they didn't create a lot more chances, but Botman hit the post, didn't he? That Alanga had the header just before the goal. But I thought Newcastle would wilt because of fatigue or whatever, and Sunderland tend to get stronger, and that's how it proved. And yeah, that spirit, but more than that organisation and determination was always going to bring them back into the game, and it was going to depend how far, if at all, they were behind when they actually made that move. But they got stronger and stronger as Newcastle started to fade, and there was a bit of an inevitability about the winner eventually.
I thought second half Sunderland were brilliant, Martin. Just there was only one team in it second half for me, and I think you're right what you said before about the fact we went in at 1-0. I did have confidence that we'd come back out and turn it around a bit, because we've, as Damian's pointed out, we've done it so many times under this manager, haven't we, where we've managed to turn a bad situation into a good one. And they showed that stat on the screen about points recovered from losing positions. And I think before the game finished, we were second behind Villa, but I think we are now the team who are top in terms of accruing points from losing positions, which I think is the only thing you need to say about that, really, isn't it? That's the proof. The proof is there that Sunderland are a very, very good team at turning things around, and you've got to point to the mentality of players like Xhaka, like O'Nien in that group who are so mentally strong. But we gave ourselves such a good chance in that second half, I think, by getting a relatively early goal because, the longer the half goes on, Newcastle's belief will come back. You just know it. That happened when we beat them at the Stadium of Light. Newcastle had their moments, but didn't make any chances in the second half. And you just felt like in the second half at the Stadium of Light, as it went on and on, Sunderland's belief just grew and grew, and they were never going to get into the game, Newcastle. And that could have well happened in this game had Sunderland not scored when we did. And it just came through pure perseverance, really. It was a scrappy goal, but I like them goals because it shows that you're willing to do whatever it takes to win the ball before your opponent. And that's all that goal was for me, because it was dead scrappy, and Newcastle will probably be fuming that they've allowed the ball to drop as many times as they did in the box.
Well, yeah, there's a few bits in that, isn't there? So I think you've got the attitude and mentality of the team, and you both said quite rightly that, a number of times this season we've come back from losing positions. We've not wilted after conceding one goal. We've tended to, batten down the hatches for a little bit, see a period of time out, and then go and play. So you've got that bit to it. And then I think we've got such a good head coach in terms of tweaking things when things are going against us a little bit. You can spot little areas where we can just make a little change and make a big difference. And look, Bris had some criticism over the recent weeks, hasn't he, about ability to get the team scoring more goals, being a bit more adventurous going forward, a bit more and all that sort of stuff. And I don't necessarily disagree with that. But where he is so strong is making little tweaks to nullify a threat of the opposition. Now, I think if you compare the first half performance in the space that Lewis Hall had down the left-hand side compared to the second half, there was a little change there with Diarra's position and Rigg holding his position that stopped Hall getting out down that left. And that was a big difference, because in the first half, especially in that opening 20 minutes or so, he had acres of space. He was just pinging crosses in. They hit the post, didn't they, from a cross that he put in. I thought he was brilliant for the first 20, 25 minutes. He was a huge threat for them. But we tweaked a couple of things to stop him having that space to run into. Gertrude was a bit more there as well in terms of fronting them up rather than dropping in. And I think those two bits combined were what we saw in the second half. Those little tactical tweaks that we needed to make, plus the attitude of the team. The goals that we scored, I think the first one came from a corner, didn't it? Which we've been critical of Sunderland set pieces and corners recently, but it was great to see us get a goal. And both goals were goals that we haven't really scored this season, where they were just a little bit scrappy in the 6-yard box. Somebody's on the right spot at the right time and can poke them in. And it was just really pleasing to see us being on the end of that. But we had other chances as well, didn't we? Talby had that beautiful shot in the first half that Ramsdale, to be fair to him there, I think it was a fault for our first goal, where he flopped a bit at it, but I think he pulled off a fantastically good save from Talby in the first half. And we had some other chances as well. Siddiqui had a good shot that was saved, and Rigg had a good shot that was saved. So we were trying to force the goal when we were trying. I think we were taking shots on more readily than we have done for a lot this season. I think we've always looked at extra pass in a lot of games this season. But yesterday we were quite happy to take a shot on. And while we didn't get a goal directly from that, it was good to see us do that. And we got just rewards with the two scrappy-ish goals, I would say, in the second half.
I think that was a key, Damian, to the way that Sunderland won the game in the end, was trying to expose some of those weaknesses in Newcastle. And I would say, Ramsdale is a very good shot stopper, but he's also not particularly commanding. And you saw that with the first goal. I think it was Granit Xhaka who took the corner. He whips it right under the bar in an attempt to unsettle Ramsdale, which it does. And I think Martin made a great point there about nullifying Hall. In the build-up to the game, he was the player I was most worried about from a Newcastle perspective. There's no denying Lewis Hall's a fantastic fullback, and he gives Newcastle so much quality down that left-hand side. I think this is something Martin touched on there. I think that's the brilliance of Regis Bris, is he almost plays chess during a game. He figures things out, figures out ways during games to nullify and hold off the opponent, essentially. And that I think in the big games in particular, that is where Bris has really shown his stuff. I mean, there's been so many moments in big games where he's done exactly that. I mean, the best example is probably the playoff final, but there have been other games, Chelsea away, even the 2 legs against Coventry last season in the playoffs, Leeds a couple of weeks ago, where, that was just a proper Regis Laprise masterpiece. And I think that's where he really comes to the fore and kind of proves that he is a top coach and I genuinely think Sunderland are so fortunate to have somebody that talented as the coach.
Yeah, I think he's a really clever technical coach, and as you say, he reads the game really well. What I like about him is he's never too high, he's never too low. He loves the detail. He absolutely loves the detail of preparing a team and then setting his team out on the pitch and tweaking it. And I think you're right to talk about Lewis Hall. I mean, the kid didn't give Lamine Yamal a kick at St James's Park a couple of days ago, one of the most dangerous wide men in world football. But I thought he had a really ordinary game yesterday, and that was largely because of the way Sunderland played against him. And I thought one of you, I think both of you possibly mentioned Chris Rigg earlier. I thought he had a really good game out there, holding his position and made Lewis Hall go the other way, which, he wants to go forward. He doesn't want to be going backwards. And while he can defend, he does his best stuff going the other way. But I thought technically that was very good. And I thought, you're right, Gertrude was much further up the pitch second half, and that was clearly a tactical shift to pin Newcastle back as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Like I said before, Martin, I think as the half went on, I just grew in confidence, and I felt Newcastle panicked. I think Eddie Howe panicked. He was, making subs that I don't think made sense. I actually think, I know he gets the piss taken out of him quite a bit, but I thought Voldemort was probably their best player. I thought he was playing really well, and then he gets taken off. And I've seen quite a lot of Newcastle fans pointing that out on social media as well, saying how it made no sense to take Voldemort off, and they actually weakened the midfield by doing so. And I just think he was where I'm talking about how Bris is such a cool operator and kind of figures things out as the game goes on. There didn't seem to be any real plan from a Newcastle perspective. I didn't think. It was just a case of chucking on like for like subs that didn't make any impact whatsoever. And then if anything, that made our lives a lot easier. I thought we then were able to just kick the game plan into overdrive and carry on doing what we'd done so well since the second half had started, and just really exposing Newcastle when they needed to be sharper. We were a lot sharper in the middle of the park with the second balls. We were working it wide quicker, as you mentioned before, getting our shots away for once. And I think Eddie Howe actually made Labrisse's job a lot more straightforward than he could have.
No, it's interesting, isn't it? Like, I don't watch much in Newcastle at all. I'll stick it on if I see they're getting beat to make sure they do get beat. But other than that, I don't sit down and watch them. But I was talking to my dad earlier, and one of his mates is a Newcastle fan. He said that's what Howe does. He replaces like for like with subs. He doesn't tend to change things much in game. He just takes centre forward off, puts a forward on, takes a winger off, puts a winger on. And it's relatively predictable what they'll do. Now, how true that is, I'm kind of getting that second hand, but that's what I've been told. But I think the biggest thing with it was they were desperate to win. The crowd was desperate for them to win, so that this pressure, they actually maybe had to go and take more risks after we equalised than they maybe would have otherwise. And I think, again, like, that left space that we could play in, and I think we just dominated that midfield in the second half. Our midfield was so much stronger than the Newcastle central midfield in that second half, and we were able to get the upper hand in that. And I think that's really where that game was won in the second half.
Yeah, and then probably the big change from a Sunderland perspective, Damian, was Enzo Lefebvre coming on for the last sort of 5 minutes of normal time. We love him. We absolutely adore Enzo Lefebvre. He's such a good player, and he's actually the quality of footballer where you could definitely see him, unfortunately, playing for a Man City or an Arsenal. He's that good. And I think he showed his quality in the final few minutes with a really patient cross to Broby. When you see the situation unfold, it is a good move from Sunderland. I think Granit Xhaka's the leader of that move with a really pacey attacking pass to get us up the pitch. And I think I can't remember who actually plays the ball to Lefebvre. It might have been Siddiqui.
Siddiqui, I think it was, wasn't it? It seemed a little bit too wide at the time as well, didn't it?
Yeah, but Enzo being the player he is, so composed, Damian, and when you would ordinarily expect a player in that position to just kind of hit and hope, get it across the box as quickly as they can, he takes that extra little touch and it just wait. And Broby's movement is fantastic. He starts off wrong side of the defender and gets in front of him, and he gets that first shot away. It's actually a decent save from Ramsdale, but he parries it back to him, and Broby just makes sure he gets it in this time and digs it into the back of the net. But I just think that was such for Sunderland in that moment, 90th minute, the game's in the balance. A lot of people maybe would have just thought waste time, sit in. Sunderland went for the kill, and it was that pass from Xhaka for me to Lafay which really set the tone, because it was like, right, let's go for it. And I just think all around it was, whilst it was a pretty scruffy goal, there was a lot of quality in the move, and it showed great composure from Sunderland in what was a high pressure situation to finish the game off.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that Lafay's strength is finding those little pockets of space, isn't it? And picking passes, and that's exactly what he was there for, and that's exactly what he did. But I think you're right about the composure there. That the temptation there would be to smash it across goal, but he didn't. He got his head up, had a look, as you say. Robbie's movement was really good, and just played that little 2-3 yard pass and got him in there. But yeah, I mean, there's an argument to say the best form of defence in a situation like that is to have the ball 100 yards away from your own goal. But to have that composure to do what they did in that moment, yeah, was just what the manager would have wanted. Yeah.
Yeah, and obviously, Martin, we went absolutely berserk. I watched it in the Avenue in Roker, and we went absolutely crazy. I mean, pint glasses flying all over the place, just bodies everywhere. It was and I imagine the scenes were exactly the same in the away end, but it was just a great way to win a derby for me. Like, I'd much rather win. The way we've won the 2 games this year have been pretty special. Like that first one, it was such a satisfying win, because it felt like Newcastle just didn't turn up in the first game. With this one, I felt like the story of the game became that Sunderland. I think Sunderland ultimately wanted it more again. I think it felt a bit like the first one in that sense, where I think Sunderland just wanted it a little bit more than Newcastle did. And yeah, obviously, tiredness comes in towards the end of games, but Sunderland, as we've said repeatedly, we didn't have a fully fit team. We were missing a lot of players. It would have been very easy, wouldn't it? As I said before, it would have been very easy for Sunderland just to get to the 90th minute and think, we'll take a point here. I would have snapped your arm off for a point. But we talk about mentality. That pass from Xhaka, that shows the mentality. It's no, we're going to win this game. We're going to go for it.
Yeah.
And I just love that goal. I love the way we won the game. It was immense.
Oh, brilliant one. Like, you couldn't really win a derby in a better way than that, I don't think, could you? I think, as I said earlier, Xhaka's so important in that, isn't he? Because he's the one who drives forward to the ball. He picks that pass out to Siddiqui and then Lafay. And it was just such a great way to end the whole thing. And, if you look at it from start to finish, you had, some incidents before the game. The team coach got the windscreen smashed, and there was obviously the incident early in the second half where the referee had to stop the game for something that was said to Gertruida. So there was all these things going on around the game as well, wasn't it? And for us just to remain composed and be able to do that at the very last kick into the game was just testament to the attitude of the whole squad. Because it would be really easy, not only just to accept the point at the end, it'd be really easy to go, we've got 5 or 6 players out. It's going to be a real struggle. But you didn't get the impression that any of them kind of approached the game like that. They all wanted to prove a point, to go and get a positive result out of the game, whether that was 1 or 3 points. But Brian Robbie, by the way, what a performance he put in.
Yeah.
I just saw from start to finish, he was superb. He was a bit isolated in the first half, wasn't he? But regardless, every time he got the ball, he was holding on to it, he was spinning, he was turning, he was driving past people. Absolute colossus up front. And that was a brilliant out for us, wasn't it? Especially in that first half where there was pressure on us. There was a few times we were able to relieve that pressure by lobbing the ball up to him. He'd hold onto it, and we were able to get back up the field. And that was crucial from a defensive point of view, because in that, after we conceded that first goal, there was that wave of attack, and we were able to relieve it by him. Second half, players got a little bit closer to him. As I was talking about half time, Bris made a few tweaks, and that again was one of them where get a little bit closer to Bobby, because he can hold the ball up And if he started linking up play a little bit better, and I just thought he was tremendous, a brilliant example of a hold up centre forward, because he just knitted things together so well and totally deserved that goal. Brilliant stuff.
Yeah, he was superb, Damian, wasn't he, Brian Broby? And I think he was when we were talking about recruitment, and you do have to kind of compare the two teams from this perspective. I think, you think about the money Newcastle have spent on forwards this year, and you look at somebody like Brian Broby, who was, he wasn't playing well for Ajax. There were reasons off the field for that. He, came into Sunderland for what I would say for a Premier League striker is a fairly modest amount of money. 20 million is a lot of money, obviously, but these days that's not a lot of money for a Premier League side to spend on a player, I don't think. And I think, when in one breath, when we're talking about how Newcastle's recruitment has been poor and they've not been able to find that Isak replacement, you look at Sunderland and Broby and you think, what a signing he's been. I think, people who maybe don't pay too much attention to Sunderland might just, bring up his stats and go, well, he scored 6 or 7 goals this season. That's not too much. But there's a whole load of other circumstances behind that. He came unfit. He came mentally in a very bad place, having been through what he'd been through in the Netherlands. Took a while to get up to speed. But I think he's been such a brilliant signing for Sunderland. And I think we saw the very best of him against Newcastle. I talked about it earlier. I thought he absolutely ragged Botman all over the place, if I'm honest. I think, he'll have been actually glad to go off the pitch, I think, by the end, Botman. But then also capped it off with a great goal, great movement, as I mentioned before. Just echo what Martin said. I think he's been a great buy for Sunderland. I think he was excellent yesterday.
I thought he had a brilliant game. Yeah. And it's funny, I was just saying to my colleague yesterday, the press box at St James's is much, much nearer the pitch than at the Stadium of Light. And I was just saying to her, I'd seen the size of Broby. He's built like a heavyweight boxer. He's got shoulders on him. Unbelievable. Because he's not a big lad in terms of height, but he's so wide and a handful. But ironically, my grandson's a season ticket holder, and I was saying to him beforehand, like Broby, but he doesn't score enough goals. Well, there you go. That's answered that one. But no, I think he's been really good. He was a focal point for the team. As you say, he held it up. He brought players in. And he gave them a real battle. I thought he was great. I thought it was really good.
Where do you see?
Sorry, I just want to drop in there. Thank goodness Chelsea recalled Mark Guiu, eh?
I know.
Yeah.
You forget about
talk about moments in the season. That could be the biggest one of all, couldn't it? Really,
especially considering the result like this. Where do you see both teams going from here, Damien? I was just looking before, and Sunderland have obviously gone above Newcastle in the table now, so we're on 43 points, 11th place, just 3 points behind Brentford in 7th. There's a lot of teams going for those, what I would call probably, Conference League spots, really. But regardless, they're there to be taken. If somebody wants to take initiative and you're kind of looking at the table, I thought for both teams, this felt like you had to win if you want to be in that conversation, because obviously, Brighton won this weekend, Fulham won this weekend, Everton won this weekend. So the teams around Sunderland and Newcastle have been picking up points at the weekend. And it was just really important that somebody won, really, for both teams. And I actually look at the games coming up for Sunderland and I'm thinking, Tottenham at home. Tottenham just awful at the minute. Villa away, Forest at home, Wolves. Sunderland have got a clutch of games coming up where if we can maintain, you look at the league form for Sunderland's been all right. We've picked up a great win away at Newcastle, got a win away at Leeds, a point away at Bournemouth. So we've addressed the away form, which was a concern. And then you look at what's coming up and you can't help but think optimistically about it. Whereas Newcastle obviously are only a point behind Sunderland, so have to be in that conversation still. But they're obviously probably looking at it with a lot less optimism, given they've gone out of the cups now, and have lost to us. So where do you see the kind of the season panning out from here for both teams?
Yeah, I think psychologically you're right in that respect. What I would say is that from Newcastle's point of view, certainly before yesterday, they were looking at the last 8 and thinking, well, of those games, I think there's only Arsenal that they wouldn't consider as, one we've got to go out and win. But then they've got an awful record against Bournemouth. They've got an awful record against Palace away. So on paper, there are points there for them. But given their current inconsistency, you wouldn't have any confidence about them taking 15, 16, 17 points. Sunderland, on the converse, what have they got to lose? Just go for it. They've got the points they needed weeks and weeks ago. They're staying up regardless. They're probably going to finish top 10 if they have anywhere near a decent season. Just go for it. As you say, they'll be playing teams who are fighting for their lives. Villa are flaky. Villa have got a similar problem to Newcastle in as much as they're trying to compete in Europe and at home. I know the Europa League is a different level, but their focus, you would think, would switch to the Europa League. So if Sunderland can go and do what they do, against the Forest, the Wolves, take advantage of Villa maybe having an eye off the ball, they've got every chance of pushing up towards those top 7-8 places.
Are you like me, Martin, thinking Sunderland have got a chance of this now, given who we've got to play in the next sort of 3-4 games?
I have, if you look at it, if you look at it without having any history of Sunderland, then yes, absolutely. Because you go, well, we've got players coming back from injury. We'll get that team back together. Nice run in towards the end of the season. Not a great deal of pressure. I always fancy us more in games that you don't expect us to win. Those home games where we've had, Fulham and Brighton. You look at them on paper, think, it's a good chance to win that, and we haven't. As Register Bris would say, we haven't found the solution to those problems that they've been posing us. So I think it's actually a really important run of games, even looking forward to next season, because we need to figure out, maybe, I said before about the criticism that Bris has got in terms of not being able to break teams down. He needs to find a solution for that. And I think some of these games offer us the opportunity to try a couple of different things to see if we can unlock that defence when teams are sitting back in and trying to defend. We know what it's like at home. If we're going punch for punch with a team at home, the atmosphere is great. Everyone's behind it. If a team's sitting back and trying to kill the game, and we're not able to get through them, it can get a little bit tense, can't it? Get a little bit frustrated, and we've got to try to turn that around at home. So I think the rest of this season offers us a great chance of finding out some things about different players in different positions potentially ahead of next season. And, the Bris will be making calls on some players for the summer as well. There'll be some players who he might not have a say in whether they leave or not. But there'll be some players where, there's contracts on offer, or he might like them, but should we move them on because they're not going to be able to do it for us next season? So I think we'll see a few players getting chances. And, it's almost no audition for next season in some respects. So it's going to be really interesting running for the rest of the season. But look, if you look at it on face value, the fixtures that we've got, there's absolutely no reason why we shouldn't be thinking, let's have a real good crack for Europe. Now, look, the Europe conversation is a whole different one, isn't it? Whether we actually want to be in Europe next season or not. And I'm genuinely in two minds about that.
Well, we've just earlier been talking about Newcastle struggling with it. It's, yeah.
I think you need a whole different type of transfer activity in summer if you're going to play in Europe as well. And, I've never seen us play in Europe. You've got to be well over 50 to have seen us play in Europe. So, there's that bit too from a historic point of view. We should be playing the size of the club. We should be playing in Europe. Will it be a season too early? Who knows? I'm just really happy for us to play the rest of the season out, do as well as we can do. The pressure's off, see where we end up. But there's absolutely no reason why we can't push for those European places. And I'm sure the squad will be aiming for that.
Yeah. And you'd much rather be Sunderland today, Damian, given, we've got 3 weeks till a game, so have Newcastle. It's a long 3 weeks if you've lost the derby, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Horrible. Well, I just know that my wife's face, she's a Sunderland fan. She's sitting opposite me. I can see the smile on her face, so I know exactly how Sunderland fans are feeling. But it's a long 3 weeks in Newcastle. A lot of the players for both teams will go off on international duty. I mean, Chris Rigg was telling us last night he was sitting on the coach for 6 hours to go away with the under-19s, England under-19s. So it's a long time to stew on it, absolutely, and come back in. And I think, I don't know, I think it's probably better for fans who've won a derby and worse for fans who've lost a derby than it is for the players, because for a lot of them it is just another game, whether it should be or shouldn't be. It is just another game, and they'll go off and play their international games and come back and start preparations for the next league game. But yeah, it should weigh heavily on the minds of Newcastle players, and it should boost Sunderland players, because whatever people say about maybe players not understanding, because if you're not from the area, you don't understand. I'm sure they do. They've all played in derbies elsewhere. They know what it's about, and they know the impact it has on the fans and the city.
I think there can be no doubt, Martin, that the players get it. The Sunderland players get it, and it's going to be I think it's going to be quite a nice 3 weeks, actually. And I don't like international breaks, and we didn't half moan about them last year, did we, when we were doing these podcasts, and we were like, another one, for God's sake. But I don't feel like there's any real loss of momentum, particularly with this one. I think we kind of all understand we probably need it just to get players back fit and ready for that run-in, as we were talking about before, being such an important run-in for Sunderland. I'm actually quite looking forward to this little break for the team, and it just means we get to talk about this derby win a lot longer, doesn't it?
It's perfectly timed. It was a perfect result, wasn't it, for us to do a daily podcast for the next 3 weeks with no football. So we can be thankful for that. We can milk that till the cows come home, can't we? But I think earlier in the season we were frustrated, weren't we? Because the international breaks punctuated the Premier League football. You had 2 or 3 games and a week off, another 2 or 3 games and a week off, and then you didn't feel as if we get into a real rhythm. This is the first international break, I think, since November, isn't it? So we've had a good long spell of a lot of football. I think Bris said himself, didn't he? Like during the AFCON, with the players that we had away, the players who remained had put themselves through an awful lot. He said probably too much in terms of football to actually cope with that and get the games played and get the results that we did. So right now, I'm absolutely delighted that we can have a little bit of a breather. The players who have been injured can have 3 weeks to get fit and do some more training and all that sort of stuff. And hopefully we'll come back in 3 weeks' time against Spurs, and we'll have a pretty much fully fit squad. There'll be 1 or 2 of them still out, but a lot of them will be back fit. They'll have 3 weeks of training, maybe plays a couple of international games, and we can really, it's almost like a mini pre-season, isn't it? Have that length of time off in the middle of a season. It's really unusual. You can almost treat it like Bris did last season. There's a little mini pre-season, and then you've got this final 6-7 games to look at as almost a mini competition, if you like. So it'll be really interesting to see how we approach it. And yeah, look, if we'd gotten beat yesterday, the 3 weeks would have seemed like a bloody eternity, wouldn't it? But I'm very content that we can spend the next 3 weeks talking about this, and I'm sure we'll talk about it a bit more as well.
Yeah, absolutely. What's the next 3 weeks look like for you then, Damian, given there's no domestic football? Are you covering any of the internationals, or is it going to quieten down a bit?
No, I'm off to Prague with the Republic of Ireland this afternoon. So they've got Czech Republic on Thursday, and then if they win that, Denmark or North Macedonia in Dublin next Tuesday. So I'll be busy for the next couple of weeks.
Nice. Well, thank you very much for joining us, mate. It's been great. Hopefully, we'll get you on before the end of the season. Maybe talking about it's Sunderland, so there's definitely going to be drama right till the end. We know it. But it'll be great to get you back on before the end of the season. And thanks for joining us.
Welcome. I've enjoyed it.
Yeah, and enjoy your trip as well. Thanks, Martin. Been great, mate.
Thank you, Gav. Yes, it's you're never going to get bored or tired about talking about a victory over the visitors or the hosts, depending on where the fixtures play. So, yeah, brilliant stuff.
Yeah, and we've got a lot coming up over the international break. We'll still have our regular On This Week pods, which you, Andrew and Kelvin, take part in. We've got Q&As. We've got various guests booked in already. We've got some special episodes, Room 101s. I think you're finally going to be unleashed on one of them, aren't you? So I've seen your list. It's quite big.
I could do a whole bloody month of Room 101s with football suppers. They keep us going. Yes, my list has been compiled over, I was going to say months, that's a lie. It's been compiled over years, and there's very good rationale behind them. So that'll be good. And yes, I think we've got none this week coming out tomorrow, if not Wednesday. So yes, there's going to be plenty of stuff for people to listen to.
And of course, I'm going to ask you, and you're prepared this time, I'm presuming. I'm going to ask you what we're talking about this week on this week.
Well, what we are talking about, I can tell you off the top of my head, we are talking about Kieran Brady's game against West Ham in 1990. I was
very
there.
Famous game. Yeah, very famous game.
Kelvin was there. Kelvin takes us through it, and looking at Kieran Brady's career around that season as well. Absolutely brilliant stuff. That's one of those games that some games get built up, and the myth and legend gets built up and exaggerated over time. That's one that wasn't exaggerated at all. It was as good as people say it was. And Andrew looks into Mick Buxton's career at Sunderland and his departure. That obviously led to Peter Reid taking over and changing the course of Sunderland history. So now there's a few good bits to delve into there as well.
Perfect. Well, I'm looking forward to that one. Thank you very much, listeners. Stick with us over the international break. We're going nowhere. We will have pods every single day to keep you going. And of course, we will not get bored of talking about beating Newcastle. So you can expect plenty of reaction to that. Make sure you get subscribed. Make sure you check out the Roker Report website. Loads going on over there too. We'll see you on the next one.